It was just a normal workday in this office, but from the very beginning of the day, our Eugene was scolded. He stood in front of his boss and could only apologize at that moment because he had wronged her again. Eugene was a pretty good worker, but only when he was actually working, because most of the time when he was asked for something, he forgot half of the requests. Suddenly, his boss compared him to an orange, so he thought it was a joke and decided to laugh at her, but it was a mistake. This was a huge mistake because it only made his supervisor angrier because she scolded him for his misdeed and he started laughing. The manager was very angry with him, but at the same time she was surprised at his memory because despite the fact that he could forget absolutely everything, he still did not forget to come to work. But she was already ready for this. He wanted to compliment her and talked about her preferences and said that he would never forget her. That's why he comes to work, but she didn't appreciate it. He was upset that she didn't understand his compliment, but at that moment she told him that he should stop doing such useless things and go to work. But despite the fact that Eugene was scolded, she asked him to make her coffee because now, because of Eugene, they will work extra. At that moment he was happy because his coffee idea worked and she became a little softer towards him. He offered to pay for her. Despite the fact that he constantly offered to pay for her coffee, she had never actually made him pay for it. Eugene's boss was named Yoonjae, but among the office workers, she was known as the work demon of the third team, and Eugene was a loser who was targeted. She was constantly by his side and pointed out the mistakes he was making. Even though it was Eugene's fault, he still wanted a break from such pressure from her. They went to a coffee shop so Eugene could make coffee for her, and he was about to let her in, complimenting her, but they suddenly stopped. Out of nowhere, they found themselves in a completely different place and found themselves in front of another room, which was unusual. They could not leave this room until they completed the race. The sign on the door said so. Woonjae's manager was in complete shock from how they got there and from the inscription on the door, because both of them did not expect this at all. Despite the fact that they found themselves in such a place and they had only one way out, they simply sat next to each other and did nothing for 20 minutes, during which time they were watched. They were watched by several beautiful girls who were simply going crazy with anticipation because they really wanted to see how they would drive the car. Even though the two girls worked alongside each other and watched people race, they also experimented on each other. This girl fell under the hand of God, who came to this world to give people happiness, and this room in which they found themselves was a place of happiness. These two girls were next to them in another room, which they did not notice. But after they started talking to each other, their voices became audible to Eugene and Yoonjae. The voices of the two girls had a very strong effect on Eugene, which embarrassed the leader Yoonjae very much, so she hid under the blanket. Suddenly, a timer appeared in their room, after which Yoonjae's loan interest would increase every 10 minutes that they were inactive. As soon as she saw the inscription about the loan, she was scared, because for her it was a very huge amount that she still had to pay, plus interest. Eugene didn't know that she was taking out a loan, and then she told him that she had just recently taken out a loan for a house because houses were very expensive these days. For the first time, Eugene saw his leader so nervous that she didn't even believe that this was reality. It seemed to him that she would soon cry like that. At one point, he finally decided to start the race and get out of there as quickly as possible because now they had a time limit. But Yoonjae was scared by his actions because she had a boyfriend and didn't want to play race with someone else. Eugene was very upset when she started talking about her boyfriend because he knew something about him that she didn't know. While Yoonjae was on a business trip, he went for a ride with someone else and then returned as if nothing had happened. At that moment, he thought about telling her about it because he was emotionally indebted to her for everything. She was proud, but he understood that she would be unpleasant to hear such a thing from him. He thought that she would only push him away if he told her about this, saying that he should not stick his nose into other people's business and just do his job. But it was even worse if she reacted differently. Suddenly, he finally decided to confess to her everything that he knew about her boyfriend because he thought that perhaps God was giving him a chance to do this. Woonjae worked hard for the wedding and even took out a house loan, but right now she found out that her boyfriend was riding in a car with Miri from another team while Yoonjae was away on a business trip. It was really very painful for him to tell her about this because he understood that this guy meant a lot to her. Eugene decided to leave her alone after this conversation because he thought that it would be more correct. He did not know at all what he should do if the girl was sad. He thought about what his leader must have been like, closing his eyes and running his fingers through the air, and came to the conclusion that she must be cheerful. But suddenly something changed. Suddenly he realized that his fingers were pointing precisely to his leader Yoonjae, who came to him after much thought. She approached him and asked him to join, so as not to be sad alone and to cheer up Eugene himself, who had just helped her. At the time when the manager returned from her business trip, she noticed that her things were mixed up but did not say anything, although she knew that she had removed everything. Even at that moment, she smelled some strange smell when she returned home. This strange smell, there was a woman's perfume that was not hers. One day when she smelled this smell again, she heard her boyfriend talking on the phone. At that moment, he asked someone not to call for a while. He got a little angry because of this conversation, but returned to his girlfriend and noticed that she took the t-shirt. At that moment, she pretended that everything was fine and they went for a ride in the car, but the guy was rude to her. Despite the fact that she asked him to stop the car, he did not do this and only continued to ride for his own pleasure. Yoonji's manager, of course, didn't know everything that was happening, but she also guessed what was happening behind her back. It was better this way, she thought so, but she also wasn't going to turn a blind eye to it all her life. Everything ends someday. Right now, the only thing she wanted was to just stop thinking about everything, so she went to Eugene and joined him for a ride with him. Yoonjae was very embarrassed about this because now he had a very strong desire to ride, which was really very noticeable, but Yoonjae had not seen it yet. He was very surprised when he realized that she had just drunk the juice because there was none there. And then she told him that she constantly carries supplies of juice with her. Eugene usually didn't understand his feelings at all and didn't try to figure them out, but he knew one thing for sure. Yoonjae was his type. Even the first time they saw each other, on the day when she became his leader, he was very embarrassed because he immediately fell in love with her. Having learned that she had a boyfriend, he was not even surprised but decided to create the image of a person whom he himself would hate so that nothing would happen. Yoonji's boss at work was cold and emotionless, as if she was a demon devoid of humanity. Therefore, he created an image with the help of which his feelings for her were supposed to disappear, and he was really afraid that this image would be destroyed. But now when he found out that she was actually a vulnerable girl who was worried about the words of others and constantly reassured herself at work, he couldn't help but fall in love with her. At one point, the manager decided to embarrass him because she noticed his desire to start riding in a car. He immediately wanted to justify himself to her, but she replied that she was just joking and understood that it was not because he liked her. She was an understanding girl and knew that he would react to it this way, since he is a very young, energetic guy who also wants to have fun in life. But despite this, she was quite determined to race because her boyfriend had not allowed her to ride in the car for a long time due to the fact that she was not always nearby. Moving little by little, she was getting closer to starting the car and asked Eugene about it. She asked him to start the race with her, but when he handed her the car keys, she was a little shocked because the key was unusual. Having asked him what was wrong with him, at first he misunderstood everything and thought that she was not talking about the car key, but about himself. But when she started to start the car, his face changed a little because he couldn't believe that he would be playing racing with Yoonji right now. Despite the fact that she herself asked him for this race, he was still not sure that he could safely ride the car due to his morale. But because of Eugene's reaction, she gained a little confidence in herself because when she was with her boyfriend and wanted to ride in the car, he didn't show it at all. There were times when she had even prepared everything to start the race, but her boyfriend just walked home and nothing happened, so she got complexes. Even though Eugene was ready to start the race with her, she decided to cheat and do something, namely pretend that she had a headache. Eugene was a little worried that she would get out of the car like this, so he decided to ask her about it, when suddenly she decided that she would get rid of it. She needed to go and replace everything unnecessary. She didn't want to do this herself despite Eugene's requests for this, because it was necessary, and then she invited him to replace everything himself. They went to the car repair shop, and there he began to figure out what was wrong, but he was a smart guy, so he immediately understood what he needed to do. At the moment when he was sorting out the car, she suddenly decided to start asking him a bunch of things about his past, namely about what he was like in past relationships. He was next to her and it just drove him crazy, because before he couldn't even dream about it, but now he found himself in such a situation. But suddenly he became very embarrassed about what happened to him, because he made a mistake and the car keys fell out of his pocket. He was trying to support her, so he started talking about how the human brain can forget all bad memories very easily. He was good at that. As it turned out, in the past, his ex bullied him for 3 years and rode in other people's cars, which he didn't like. But he was able to forget everything and avoided this situation. When he told Yoonji about this, she was very surprised because she did not expect to hear something like that from him, and this influenced further actions. Without even letting him tell everyone about it completely, she decided to ask him to help her forget everything that happened to her recently. Eugene understood that sometimes people destroy their personality after bad moments in life. They drink juices until they lose consciousness and go to others' cars, and he thought that this was such a case. But he wanted to help her because perhaps now she was just carried away, and now this has become what she really wanted to achieve. But for him, it is not so. During all these thoughts, they had already managed to assemble and start the car, which was getting ready to hit the road. They did their race on a regular road, but she suddenly felt that she couldn't feel the track, so he decided to go to the racetrack. He was very interested at that moment, what she felt during the race, because after such a sharp start, it becomes a little cool. He was conscious, but until that moment he did not fully believe that what was happening was reality, but now he was definitely convinced of it. The moment he realized that he was about to start the race with Yoonji, he was watching her because she looked more worried than before. He thought about stopping the race because it seemed to him that she felt embarrassed after what she had done, but she told him in a quiet voice to continue. This motivated him greatly, so he immediately stepped on the gas and they raced along the racetrack in the car. Yoonji screamed out of suddenness, and at that moment he noticed that her voice was quite sweet, despite the fact that she always scolded him in the same voice. He had no idea that such a calm girl who was always cold could scream because of the speed in the car. Eugene was deep in thought during the race, so he didn't even notice how the car ran out of gas and had to suddenly stop. After they raced cars, the door actually opened and they could go out, but now he was worried about one question. What would their relationship be like after that? They were already ready to leave this room in which they played racing, but the door suddenly slammed, which frightened Eugene very much. At that moment, they had a new task, which stated that 2 cars had to run out of gas, otherwise they would not get out. Eugene felt an unusual sense of relief at that moment, despite the fact that he had fallen into the same trap again, acting like a child thinking about marriage to a girl he had just met. They ended up in this room again, so they had to stay there until the next day to complete the task and get out of there. But when Eugene was getting ready for bed, his head was filled with thoughts of Yoonji. He thought that he would take better care of her than her boyfriend. As a result, because of similar thoughts, that night, he dreamed of something unusual. In this dream, Yoongi returned to his home and saw something there that he completely unexpected. It was Yoonji who had prepared dinner for him. Even in his sleep, he behaved officially. It was a prophetic dream, so he could control events, and he calmly talked there, as if in real life. She met him from work, and they were getting ready for dinner, which she had prepared for them because Eugene in this dream was her boyfriend. Of course, they were going to have dinner, but Yoonji decided to invite him to go to the bathroom because he returned after a hard day at work. But Eugene didn't want to waste time, so he decided that he would spend all this time with her and decided to play racing. She suggested it to him because her friends recommended it, but she thought it sounded stupid and wouldn't work at all, although she was immediately convinced of the opposite. Not even a second had passed before Eugene started this race and immediately accelerated to breakneck speeds. For Yoonji, it was a shock. Despite the fact that Eugene was in a dream, God could watch this dream. At that moment, this God realized that Eugene secretly wanted this. Due to the fact that God was waiting, she became bored and decided to play alone until those guys woke up. God's assistant was in another room watching him, but she was pretty happy for her because she was finally able to win the game. Eugene woke up in bed and was incredibly shocked because he realized that it was just a dream and it upset him a little, but he immediately started looking for Yoonji. I didn't have to look for her for long because she was next to him and waited until he woke up to start the second round in this race and take revenge from him. A few minutes earlier, she had woken up and had absolutely no memory of anything that happened the previous night due to the juice. But suddenly she heard the words of Eugene, who was talking in his sleep. He accidentally told her that he loved her. At that moment, she remembered what happened and was very grateful to him because he tried very hard to calm her down. After what she remembered, she decided to thank him for what he did for her, but she didn't know if Eugene would believe her that she only wanted this. But she also understood that he would not be able to dissuade her and stop her because she had already decided for herself. That will give him everything back. After he woke up, she told him about what she heard while he was sleeping, and this embarrassed him very much because now she knew about his dream. At the moment when he became very embarrassed, she realized that she was not mistaken, but rather hit the nail on the head and was right. So she continued. She decided to ask him what kind of dream it was, but he didn't want to answer, so she had to start everything herself. While she was trying to thank him for everything he did for her, she tried to monitor his reaction to understand what she needed to do. It was very cute, and at the same time it drove Eugene crazy because it was a dream for him. He tried to stop her so as not to lose to her during this race because she used forbidden tactics, but he failed. Eugene started to get really nervous when he lost to her, but she quickly calmed him down by doing this. It was like she made him fall in love all over again. They played race again, but Eugene still didn't tell her about the sign on the door, so he was going to do it now. But as it turned out, Yoonji actually saw this inscription too. But she deliberately did not leave this room because she was not sure if she wanted to. Yoonji was very worried about getting out of there because she would have to meet her boyfriend again after what she found out. She was indecisive and didn't know how to get rid of everything that happened, so she asked Eugene for some time to prepare. But Eugene understood that this could not continue for long and decided to start the race himself to defeat her. Before starting the race, he decided to reassure her that after leaving this place, she would not be alone and he would support her in everything and help her figure it out. Having promised this, Eugene invited Yoonji to get out of there with him. He didn't know whether he would be useful to her if he ended up with her, but now she had someone to whom she could vent during such a difficult period. These were such typical words that anyone could say, even just to calm a person down, but Yoonji had not heard them from anyone for so long, so she even accidentally burst into tears. Eugene was about to apologize for everything he had done, but at that moment she stopped him and asked him to continue. He was very surprised by this decision. Eugene was pleasantly surprised. He wasn't going to stop, so he started this race. During the race, he accidentally started talking complete nonsense, although he was trying to maintain his image. Despite the fact that just a couple of minutes ago he lost to her in the race, Eugene decided to take revenge and defeat her, because he was not going to stop until this happened. Yoonji completely broke Eugene's image, and at that moment the real race began, which Eugene tried so hard not to show. Not even a couple of minutes had passed before Eugene was able to instantly defeat Yoonji, who couldn't even resist the machine. He was very fast and was a professional at it. After this race, she again said something that embarrassed him very much, after which he could not believe that this was the girl he himself knew. He won the race but didn't want to finish the race so quickly, so they continued riding. For Eugene, this was not a reason to stop, because there was still a lot of fuel in the car, and he was full of strength to win the race over and over again. Because Yoonji had just lost, she had the feeling that simply stepping on the gas would instantly make her lose to Eugene. These words that he just heard attracted Eugene very much, so he just accelerated and completely forgot about the brakes. Yoonji completely lost her mind after she lost, so she asked him not to stop until he ran out of gas from the car. After these words, Eugene lowered his head and thought that the car had run out of gas, but this was not the case, because Yoonji was carrying a lot of gasoline with her and was not going to stop so easily. Right after he had to stop for gas, he seemed to come back to reality and decided to ask Yoonji how she was feeling, because he was rude while driving, although he didn't notice it. But she didn't even bother to answer this because she liked this race and wanted to continue it, so she very quickly returned to the car again. At the same time, the god's assistant was in the next room and enjoyed the spectacle that they put on for her because it was cool. The goddess herself was also next to her, but she didn't like it so much because the assistant couldn't finish her work, so she was asked to speed up. The goddess asked a question to her assistant, but she ignored her, so she thought that she was not able to answer her questions because she was busy. Despite the fact that she could not answer her questions due to being busy, she needed to do this because the goddess poured forth and began to provoke her to answer. The goddess began to realize that her assistant was not going to finish the job so quickly, so she decided that she would help her with it. But at that moment, the assistant stopped her. Because of her position as an assistant, she could not do anything, but she admitted that she really wanted to finish this job as soon as possible, despite the fact that she really liked this work. In Yoonji and Eugen's room, all the fun was coming to an end and the race was over, so the door to the room opened and they could safely leave from there. But Eugene was interested in something else at that moment, because Yoonji looked as if she was ready to stay with him in this room. It seemed to him that she had opened her heart to him, but suddenly she said completely unexpected things. She said that he was just terrible, and she would ruin his whole work life, so he just had to disappear. But Yoonji was just training to answer her boyfriend like that. Despite this, Eugene was very scared. He felt as if he had just been abandoned. He was going to help her with everything, so he kept listening to her versions of how she could break up with her terrible boyfriend. Yoonji was going to tell him different versions of what she might say, but first she decided to thank Eugene because thanks to him, she now sees the world a little differently. At that moment, she decided to confess her love to him, asking his permission if she could ever fall in love with him. These words embarrassed him very much, but they really only brought him joy and he agreed to it. He knew she was probably nervous despite her smile, but he still wanted to tell her that everything would be okay. He didn't care how often after that she would turn to him for help. Whenever she was scared and lonely, whenever she needed him, he would always be there. Some time passed and Yoonji returned to work, but her colleagues learned something interesting, that she was going to break up with her boyfriend. Yoonji went outside to buy coffee with her boyfriend at that time, and at that moment decided to tell him about all this. The guy tried to fix everything and told her that she couldn't make such a decision alone and leave him. But this was not an argument for Yoonji, because he also did not discuss anything when he was racing with someone else behind his girlfriend's back. Only at that moment did her boyfriend realize that all this happened because of his hikes and rides with others. He didn't even have time to say a word as she continued. Despite the fact that the guy was wrong in this situation and should have left silent, he began to talk about how no guy would tolerate her because she was old-fashioned. At that moment, Eugene appeared behind her, who was the guy who would follow Yoonji anywhere and conquer everyone for her sake. As soon as the ex-boyfriend saw Eugene, his legs began to shake and he decided to run away from there, saying that they wouldn't get away with it so easily. It was very funny. Eugene came and pissed him off because he just started getting so angry, even though it was all his fault. Yoonji thanked him for being by her side and helping her through all this, in order to quickly figure it out. From that day on, they dated. Pretending that nothing bad had just happened, they decided to return to the office for pleasant, emotional conversations about each other. This girl was Weonjae, the leader of the third team, which you already knew. But now there was something new. Now she was the girlfriend of this young, attractive guy named Eugene. Yoonji was a real beauty, but there was one thing no one could notice until they played the race, and that was the driving skills she had. During these thoughts, Eugene noticed Yoonji's gaze on himself and was very scared. But literally after a second, he realized that he should not be afraid, because now she was his beloved. At that moment, he realized how pleasant it was to exchange glances with her. Suddenly, Yoonji spoke exactly the same as she spoke to him at work before. She was going to scold him because he was doing nothing again. He was confused and immediately apologized to her, saying that he would fix everything now and continue working. But suddenly Yoonji became kind again and asked him to gather his thoughts so that he could finish quickly, because she didn't want him to stay overtime. Eugene's colleagues felt truly sorry for him, because they thought that on Friday he would be stuck with his hot-tempered boss. But this was what he had been waiting for so long. Almost all the workers left, except for the boss Yoonji and Eugene himself. Then she asked him to close the door. Closing the door, they immediately decided to start playing the racing game they had been waiting for all day. It was something new for Eugene, but it was something he really liked. He really liked this situation, so he decided to speed things up and quickly get to the ignition key, but was surprised because the key was already ready. The girl was very embarrassed because she did not at all expect that he would try to start the car with such a sudden movement. Because she was very embarrassed, he wanted to continue teasing her, but he still decided to help her and started this race very quickly. This was what they had been waiting for. Eugene didn't quite understand what was happening, because his senses were heightened and it was very cool. Most likely it was because of the game in the office. He didn't even know if all the workers had left the office, or if some were still working while they were busy doing something else, but that wasn't interesting. After all, the most interesting thing was right in front of him. Eugene could not even think that Eunji would be in such a position and play a race with him. They played a race, but Eugene finished the first race very quickly, and after that common sense returned to him. Despite the fact that he won and common sense returned to him, after that they repeated this race 3 more times. Eugene was a little embarrassed because he didn't expect to ever see the cityscape in the night office with his boss after the game. He decided to talk about it, when suddenly Yoonji asked him to stop calling her Miss Yu, as he called her all the time because now they were dating. Because of these words, he started laughing because she was very cute at that moment. She asked him about it, and then he agreed to call her just Nuna, because now they were dating. After that, they agreed to spend the weekend together, which was planned to be very fun.